Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Humans of AI podcast. I'm joined today by Claire Warwick, Professor of Digital Humanities at Durham University. Let's
Claire?
start with the spark. What were the social challenges or the public issues that you were aiming to solve with AI when you started your project? And why did AI seem to be the right tool to solve the issues at stake?
Okay, so we started working with a museum in County Durham called the Bowes Museum because they got in touch with us and they're wanting to reorganise the way that their paintings are hung. Because the museum itself is a remarkable building, actually. It looks like a French chateau, but it's in the middle of the northeast of England. And it was founded in Victorian times, and like many galleries at the time, it's absolutely stuffed with paintings. If you see pictures of it in the Victorian time, they were literally almost no wall space. There were paintings everywhere. Now it's a bit simplified from that, but there's still a lot of paintings, and the um, the new management at the Bows were concerned that perhaps this is overwhelming for visitors. Do we know that visitors are actually enjoying themselves? Are they seeing interesting paintings? Are they seeing paintings that are artistically important? And you can ask people, but you can't actually tell what people are really looking at without some kind of recording device. So in the past, people have used things like handheld videos, or they've actually had a researcher sitting in the gallery watching people. But even then, you can't actually tell what they're really looking at in the painting. So there's a team of us at Durham involved in this. There's myself from Digital Humanities. We have an art historian, Andy Beresford, who's the lead of the project. We have two psychologists, Sozi Casto and Dan Smith. And we also have two computer scientists, Hubert Schum and Francis Shang. And so we're a multidisciplinary team, and we decided that the way we would find out about this would be by using portable eye tracking glasses. So, they literally look like glasses, but they can literally record exactly where the viewer looks. Now, as you may imagine, obviously this has to be done with permission. People have to be properly informed about this. But we had a lot of volunteers, actually. We ran a study over last summer and we had over 120 people volunteering. So at that point, you've got a lot of video, which might be very, very time consuming to evaluate if someone literally had to look at all of the videos of everyone's gallery visit. So Hubert and Francis then decided that the best way to do this would be to use AI, an algorithm called YOLO, which then automatically classifies the video and is able to do that kind of gaze analysis, but at scale. So much more quickly, much more efficiently than we would be able to do with the naked eye. So that's speeded up our analysis enormously. So yeah, that's why we decided to use AI, and it's actually been very successful. I mean, people have a sense. It's probably horrifying to most people. It wasn't to my colleagues who understand these things, but it was horrifying to me how very quickly most people look at things in museums. I mean, in art museums, you see the gaze, and it shifts so quickly. From painting to painting to painting. There is the cliche of people standing, kind of looking at paintings in a gallery, and that's not how most of us look at them. It really isn't. It's seconds. It's like 10 seconds, 15 seconds sometimes per painting. So that gave us a lot of evidence that we've analysed and we've written up, and we're just arranging to go over and present it to the curators at the Bowes, so they get a sense of, you know, what we found. So yeah, that's why we used AI, and we've found it's been very successful.
You mentioned how people's attention spans can be surprisingly short, almost like the TikTok effect, even when they're looking at artworks. But when you add labels or context, what they're seeing suddenly becomes more meaningful. Now, what kind of impact did this have on how people engaged with the collections? And were there other moments where AI revealed new ways for visitors to connect with cultural heritage? or where the results were quite different from what you expected?
Yeah, I mean, we actually we were quite, in a sense, sort of surprised because um, this model, YOLO, was developed um, really to train. It's trained on real human people in like normal situations where actual people are talking to actual people or looking at actual people, and that's the way the model's developed. But we were surprised to find that you actually can use it on representations of people or things or animals in a painting. So it wasn't developed, the model wasn't originally developed to evaluate how people view art, but it turns out to be actually surprisingly successful. And it means that we can tell the difference between things like, when is someone looking at a painting and when are they looking at the labels? Because when we go to galleries, most of us like to look at the labels and find out a bit more about the painting. And that's turned out to be really important because we were able to tell that if people look at the labels, the longer well, if they look at the labels, but then the longer they spend looking at the labels, they're more likely to spend a longer time looking at the painting. And we asked them at the end of the visits, how much they'd enjoyed their visit, which paintings they remembered, those sorts of things. And we're able to correlate across from that to the time that we can see they're spending. And so it turns out that the longer people look at these images, the more they seem to enjoy their visit. So actually, that's really important information because it tells the people who run the museum that actually labels are really important, and you should have labels that people find them. It seems to improve their appreciation of their visit. So all of that, the fact that you can tell, the AI, the model enables us to tell the difference between what people are looking at, whether they're looking at a label, looking at a painting, is actually really important. And that wasn't something that we necessarily expected when we started this study. We haven't done really in-depth interviews with people, so we can only tell, we can tell that, a certain participant tended to looked at labels, tended to look at paintings for longer than the average time. And then we can correlate with their questionnaire, and that participant is therefore more likely to say that they enjoyed it. We don't know why they enjoyed it. That's the thing. This is one thing you can't get from AI. It will tell you what someone is doing, but it can't tell you why they're doing it or what they thought about while they were doing it. And that's why you have to use other techniques as well.
You've hinted at some of the challenges, the difficulties already, from data sets to public engagement. Now, what were the biggest challenges you faced in deploying this project? Were they technical, ethical, or policy related? And more broadly, what could improve in Europe's AI ecosystem to better support public interest AI?
I mean, challenges for us, yeah, as you say, it's very, very important this is done ethically. So, some people have tried studying this kind of behavior in museums using things like CCTV footage, which, many museums, including the Bose, just were not comfortable with. They just felt it, even if we were very open about it, and even if we told people that this footage would be used, it would have been very difficult for them to take themselves out of the gaze, as it were. So ethically, it's extremely important that we do this properly. And there is, of course, a potential biasing effect. So, if you ask someone to wear a pair of AI glasses, they know they're wearing a pair of AA glasses. And, even in quantum physics, scientists are always aware that the fact that someone, or in the case of some experiments in quantum physics, a thing is being observed will change its behavior. So, there is the problem that because you need to do this ethically and because people know that they're wearing glasses, it is possible it may change their behavior. We don't know. And, we have to accept that there may be a biasing effect. So you're never going to be able to do this absolutely naturalistically. If you're ethical, you can't be completely natural with it. And that's just the nature of things. So, we do our best with that. I mean, there's another kind of interesting challenge, which in fact doesn't relate to the AI so much as the behavior research, and the reasons behind it, where I talked about this work at a recent conference. And one of the members of the audience said to me, well, because I was saying, one of the reasons why we're doing it is the curators are wanting to be sure that they have some artworks that are kind of important, and they wanted to be sure that people could see them and remembered them, and they weren't being obscured by other things. And I mentioned this, and someone in the audience said, yeah, but does it matter? If they actually enjoy their visit, does it matter if they didn't see a painting that the curators think of as important? If they liked a different painting, who's to say that that isn't so important to them? So yeah, I mean, those sorts of questions about, who decides what people should look at is that's out with the AI. The AI can tell us, as I say, what they look at, and we can use it to report to the museum, and they may use it as a basis for changing their displays if they wish to. But in the end, that kind of link between, okay, who decides and why do we use the AI, and that is those kind of questions about what is AI being used for and who decides, and what if the people who are the users of AI have different views. I mean, that is a big challenge, and that's not just in cultural heritage. That's much more broadly. Who makes the decision to use AI? Is it appropriate? What do the people who use it think? And actually, we have very, very little information about what your average person, who just is the person on the bus or wherever, thinks about the use of AI. We don't really know, and I'd like to know, but I haven't been able to get funding with that study yet. But I actually think that that's a very serious problem, because there's the danger that you have someone in a position, political power potentially, who says, right, we should do this with AI, and you don't know whether the average voter actually really understands what's happening, what it's being used for, whether it's being used ethically, all of those sorts of things. So that's a kind of broader issue that's related to our work, but it's these questions of who decides and whose voice gets heard. And I do think it's kind of interesting in that sense that, that, as you'd have seen, there's been some concern recently about, is there going to be a financial crash because too many businesses based on AI may be overvalued? Because the recent report comes out of MIT saying that 95% of businesses who've been using AI in their business aren't seeing any benefit of it. Now, that's commercial and that's financial, etc., etc. But to me, what that's saying is it's a similar problem, that people are deciding we should use AI. Our employees should use AI, or our clients should use AI if they're, let's say, people involved in the welfare system or the the healthcare system. But what if nobody asked the employees or the clients, and what if they don't understand the AI, or what if they don't find it helpful, and then what happens? So yeah, there's a lot of questioning about this, and I hope that as this kind of technology matures, people will think more about these kinds of user-based questions.
Looking ahead, how do you see AI evolving in the cultural heritage sector? What new uses or collaborations do you imagine emerging in the next few years? And what role should policymakers play to ensure Europe remains a leader in open, responsible, and public good AI?
One of the things to start at the end of that question is thinking about, okay, what can Europe do to retain or to guard its position in this sense? I think one of the things that Europe does really well is recognise public goods, and that cultural heritage, that the arts are a public good. They don't, they may not obviously have the kind of spin out potential that something like the use of AI in science or medicine has. But they could be really important in terms of the culture of Europe, people's well-being, people's mental well-being, people's social well-being. We saw obviously during COVID, when all the museums were closed, many museums thought, oh, okay, well, this is our chance. We will take everything online. Our future will be everything digital. We'll digitize all of our exhibits and we'll put them all online, and that'll be it. That'll be that. We'll kind of turn into almost like digital museums. And at the time, I thought, I'm not certain about this, but my PhD student, Ellen Charlesworth, has done a fantastic study about this, in which she's found that actually, no, in fact, people don't want to carry on interacting with museums in digital terms. And the amounts of traffic, just, once they didn't have to, after lockdowns, the amount of traffic for these digital exhibits has just plummeted back down to kind of levels that it was pre-COVID, because people want to visit museums. They want to have a social experience. They want to go with their family. They want to see, they want to be in the presence of something that kind of makes your skin tingle with excitement. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that is something, this sort of the role of cultural heritage in the kind of social world, in terms of contributing to people's well-being and mental health, is something that Europe seems to recognise, which is really, really positive, I think. The other thing is, of course, museums do have an economic benefit in terms of attracting visitors, perhaps to areas where they wouldn't otherwise go. I mean, the Bose Museum I've been talking about is in a relatively small market town in the northeast of England that people wouldn't probably otherwise visit. So, having this really impressive art museum is definitely something that draws visitors to that particular place. So I think the recognition of this within kind of European policy is really, really important. I think the other thing, which will be much less easy to do, is that if you want to compete in AI, we've really got to be able to keep up with the technology and just the size of machines, the size of the kind of clouds and the high performance computing, etc., etc. I mean, some of the computing capacity that organisations like OpenAI have is huge. And certainly the UK, the UK nationally cannot match that. I don't know what Europe's capacity is in this, but it's going to be something, a super governmental organisation like the EU ought to have the ability to make sure this happens, and that people collaborate, as they do at CERN, for example, on AI research at that big scale. Because if we can't run computing, if we don't have that computing capacity, we can't run the huge scale models that organizations like OpenAI, who are obviously commercial, they're not governmental in any way, run. Then we can't compete, and if we can't compete, we have no role in kind of regulating what is going on in those organizations. So yeah, I think EU has a huge role. Also, of course, in terms of the AI directive is fantastic, and is really important that the European Commission and the European Parliament have been thinking about how do you regulate this activity, how do you protect citizens, how do you make sure that they're not just in a kind of Wild West market situation. And the EU's been doing that in relationship to the internet since the 1990s, and it's extremely important that it carries on doing it. So yeah, I'm very positive about the EU's role in this.
Thank you, Claire. We're reaching the closing of the podcast. Now you have 1 to 2 minutes. What's the key message you'd like to share? Policymakers, people from the GLAM sector, the public, what would you like them to take away from this conversation?
I'd like them to take away from this conversation the idea that AI is not a terrible thing or a wonderful thing, that we need to think about how we use it and where we use it and where it's most appropriate. And my fear is that if there is a kind of AI version of the dot-com crash, then and some of it's overvalued, then what happened in the dot-com crash was some organizations survived, but many organizations that were perfectly good went down in that crash, just because people had suddenly decided that the internet wasn't all that much anyway after all. And actually that affected, it didn't just affect business, it affected governmental confidence in things digital. And suddenly from being the answer to everything, it was, oh, well, this is massively overhyped and we're not really interested. Of course, things come back. But I hope that we can avoid that kind of hype driven, it's wonderful, it's terrible kind of cycle, and think about where AI is useful and how it can be used in concert with other things. So, what we're doing in our project is using AI to analyze the output from glasses, but we're also talking to people after their visit. We're using questionnaires. We're looking at what people say about their visit, as well as analyzing the output from the AI glasses. So it's thinking about where is AI most appropriate, and that it is not the answer to everything, but it is equally not absolutely demonic and not useful for anything. There are too many scare stories as well as too many hype stories. So that would be my message. We need to think about how it's used most appropriately and how it fits into what humans as social beings want to do.
Thank you, Claire. I think that's a very clear message, and I'm hoping that both policymakers and journalists are listening to this recommendation. Thank you so much.